So as I was sitting there, I almost train wrecked myself, because as I looked at that picture, I came up with a sermon on rationalization, I came up with a sermon on temptation, and I realized you've got one before you, you've got to give. Got to do the first one first. On the good side though, a couple of things again got said ahead of time that play right into it. Being prompted, or prodded possibly even, to do the right thing. And we think about that sometimes when people aren't doing what they need to be doing. And also, sometimes it's stuff we even know about. And I'm glad Boone brought up the part about what the high school students might be missing that they need. And sometimes we don't grasp it, don't really relate to it. I can name off a certain high school football team, currently undefeated. Some days those kids don't get but the one meal they get on Friday when the parents make breakfast for the football team. We need to realize there are those that are less fortunate, that we have the opportunity to make a difference. Spiritually, we need to realize there are those that are in need. And if it's through prompting and prodding to get them here, let's prompt and prod, because the need is real. And when I picked this picture, there's a bit of humor to it, but there's also a bit of reality to it. Because when you look at that little dog, he's looking at that cake, and the first thing he's thinking is, the cat took the first piece. It's all the cat's fault, and I'm getting blamed for it. And if I was going in the direction of rationalization, the rationalization then becomes, I should eat the rest, because if I'm going to get blamed for it, I might as well enjoy it. What's the real motivation here? Is it in getting the cake or the pie or whatever that is? Giving it's Thanksgiving coming up, it's probably one of those sweet potato pies with the marshmallow stuff on top that I love so much. Or is it in doing what's right? And the passage we looked at, Romans 12, 1 through 2, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good, or what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And Robert is awesome because he gives me something regularly to work with. His thoughts for this week. This passage tells us that our transition from this world is a continuous process. It begins with our baptism. This gives us the Holy Spirit, which gives us or helps us to understand God's word. The word supplies the instruction to make the continuing change in our outward and inward person. We cannot make this change alone. Only God can make these changes in us. Our part is to desire the change in our way of living and thinking. Ideally, we should become a living example of perfect conformity to God's will. Ideally, prompted. Sometimes the motivation we look for is something on the outside. I know a person who used to pay his kids to study the Bible so they could get good scores on Bible tests. When he stopped paying the kids, do you think they continued studying their Bible? No. Because their only motivation for studying the Bible was the money they would get. And when I say money they would get, was it $150? Yes. They would get paid $150 to study to get a good test score. That's an awful lot of money. What did they learn to value? They learned to value the money. And to look at a specific person who valued money a bit too much, Matthew 26, 14 through 16. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time, he sought the opportunity to betray him. And you could be thinking, well, the question is, what could he get out of it? What are you willing to give me? But just like with that $150, Bible study wasn't the focus. Judas, he's asking, what can I get out of this? But who went to who? Did the priests come and seek out Judas? Are you one that's willing to... Oh, wait, you're not one that's willing to betray. We'll move on to somebody else and ask. No. Judas went to them. It might not be obvious, but the truth is, if you're willing to sell out, that's almost a statement. And it doesn't matter what the price is. If you're willing to sacrifice your marriage with infidelity, and they've made movies about that, what's the price tag? How much does it cost for you to do what you know is wrong? If you're willing to consider the question, you're already in deep danger. We have a flip side, though. 1 Peter 3:21 and 22. There is also an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience towards God, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. And I want to back up. The answer of a good conscience towards God. You want to talk about prompting and motivation? When you think about, let's talk with one easy first. Speed limits. Speed limit says 65 miles per hour. Anybody here think anybody on the road has a problem understanding what the rule is? No. When we see that 65, we know nobody in the United States is confusing that with 65 kilometers per hour, that this is a suggestion that if you don't think it fits the moment, then go for whatever you desire. The rule is known and understood. Okay, let's talk about negative consequences. You speed and get pulled over, you're going to get a ticket. Depending upon how far above that speed limit is, depends upon how juicy that ticket may get. Does that stop people from speeding, knowing they're going to have to pay for the consequences of ignoring it? And we say, no way. Because there are times, Vicki will get on to me, both of our speedometers are about 2 to 3 miles per hour below what they should be at. And I'm saying that based on those weird radar things you see on the side of the road that tell you what speed you're going at. I will have it pegged out right at 45 and you'll go up to it and she'll tell me, look, it says 43. I know, but it says 45 there. She goes, yeah, exactly. It says 43. You need to speed up. Because I think Vicki would like to get there always a little bit quicker than my foot wants to get there. So I may know that my speedometer is off by about 1 to 2 miles. I don't think the guys that are passing me sometimes when I'm on I-75 and I'm pretty sure I'm going the speed limit, and I'm sure they're not walking by as far as the speed they're going. Fact is, it looks like they're going 30 miles per hour and I'm standing still. Shoo! They're not worried about the negative. Now, let's turn that around. What would it be if we were told, if at the end of a year, if you don't speed, I'll give you $150? Is that going to stop any of those people from doing what they were already going to do? No. Because the truth is, when we're talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, intrinsic, it's what's inside of me. And it's what I really am. extrinsic motivation is paying you to act. Does that change what's inside of here? No. Because if you're willing to take the 150, you're the kind of person that's willing to take the 150. That willingness to compromise yourself for the right dollar figure is a scary position to be in. It's scary because if you're willing to do that, what about your spouse? Are they willing to compromise too? Are your friends willing to compromise? How good a friendship is it? When compromise is an option, when you're willing to change your values because of an extrinsic, an outside of me kind of motivation, it really gets down to what's your price tag. When we're talking price tag, the biggest price has already been paid. God sent his son, came down to this world, lived like we do, faced temptation, overcame temptation, and was still willing to go to Calvary. And it wasn't the peachy keen easy kind of trip to Calvary. It was sweat and blood. If there's any way out of this, I so want the way out. Why? He came fully human like we are. He came, faced, and overcame the way we have to overcome. Bearing up under the temptation. Think about it. When it talks about Jesus being tempted 3 different ways, it meant he actually had the desire. He had the desire for food. After 40 days, I can so understand that. I've only gone 10 days without. And while truth is, at the end of 10 days, your body is sort of flipped over a bit. You're not thinking about the food, unless you're thinking about the fact that it's the 10th day and tomorrow is the day I can eat. All of a sudden, day 9 was easy and day 10 is murder. If you're thinking about tomorrow I can eat. If you're thinking about not doing what you're doing. At the end of the 40 days, he might have been waiting. Okay, Lord, Father, when does this get done? And if he's thinking every day about, Father, when does this get done? That was a brutal 40 days. He wanted the food. That was a temptation. He wanted the recognition. That was a temptation. He wanted the people to turn and hear him. That was a temptation. But rather than give in, he stood by what he knew was right. He was going based on a greater inward conviction than the temptation to fulfill the desires in a wrong way. Because eating food is not wrong. Being recognized for the good that you do is not wrong. Having people turn and follow the teaching of God is not wrong. But you can go about all 3 of those in the wrong way. Just like Jesus made it an internal thing to strive to do the right in spite of his own desires. We need to be working, and I do mean that word, working, on what's in here to make it so strong that the acting because it pays is so not a part of being able to get on our radar. I don't mean get on our radar. I mean it cannot be there. You can't put up a dollar figure that's going to tempt me as far as my relationship with my wife. It's not a radar kind of thing. It's not there. My brain doesn't work that way. We need to be gearing ourselves up in our relationship with God, in who and what we are on a daily basis. Temptation is only temptation when we're allowing it to become that in our lives. when we allow the desire to grow and be nurtured. It's not a temptation when we have put it off the map completely. We're the ones who make the choice to strive. When we're not making the choice to strive, to become what we're called to be, we're letting the foothold grow for that extrinsic temptation. Because the truth is, when it's extrinsic, it's not motivation, it's temptation. That dad was trying to tempt his kids into doing what they wouldn't normally do. And it didn't work. It might have worked temporarily, but it didn't change anything. We're not working on tempting people into heaven. We're not working on tempting our kids into doing what's right. We're trying to motivate them to grow so that the things we teach become the standard. We need to also recognize that on a daily basis, we need to be striving to grow, not just for ourselves, but for that group I just mentioned. Because when our children and others see us, no matter what our age, striving to become more and more a child of God, they realize, you know what? That person is special. Not just because they've done good for me, but because daily on a regular basis, what I see in them is. And that's what I want to be a part of me. Acts chapter 2. Read it. 41 through the end, 46. That's only 6 verses. It wasn't just the doctrine. It was steadfast in fellowship, the relationship, the commitment one to another. And they grew in number. Why? Because everybody realized they had the rightest game in town, or because they realized they had the same kind of needs? It's up to us to make the decision. It begins when we choose to take on Christ in baptism, but it continues forward every day when we choose to make Christ more a part of who we are instead of buying into what the world is willing to offer. If you need to take on Christ in baptism or you need the prayers of the church, you're more than welcome to come as we stand and sing.